Well, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast. We're so excited for you guys. Here today with me, I have Jim Bergmann of MeasureQuick. Jim, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
One of the reasons I've asked Jim to come on here is our industry continues to evolve and continues to innovate and change. And so what I'm hoping that Jim will share with us today is just some easy and incredible ways to implement technology into your business, but also talking about some topics on how we can kind of restructure our approach to hiring and the talent acquisition piece of this, leveraging that new technology to give us efficiencies in the hiring process and also delivering a better customer experience overall with the brand. With that being said, as you know, here on Reputation Igniter, our podcast is focused on helping elevate our industry, where the only barrier to entry is really the level of professionalism with which you have to execute your business to remain in the game and continue to grow. And so we're always constantly trying to bring on leading experts and leaders in the industry like Jim here, but we're also trying to bring on more HVAC owners, such as yourself, who are listening, and to share your zone of genius. We grow strictly by referrals. And so every single person that's coming on this podcast, you know, has been vetted by somebody else. And so you know that the information, the insight, the wisdom that you're getting is good quality information. And so we ask that you just continue to spread the word by liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and writing a review if you feel so inclined, to get the word out and allow this information to spread and disseminate throughout our entire industry, especially given the fact that we're constantly fighting a battle out there in our communities. When the mainstream media is demonizing our entrepreneurial spirits, we know that we're putting bread on the table for our families, we are supporting our employees, and we're serving our communities. So with that, let's jump in. Jim, could you maybe share a little bit? I know you came from a teaching background, and then you kind of started True Tech Tools because you saw a gap in sort of the distribution side of things. And now you own and run MeasureQuick, which is an awesome, incredible sort of a technology tool sort of approach to helping people make better decisions in and out of the home and to providing better solutions for their customers. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about what was the genesis or the impetus for creating and starting a company like MeasureQuick to solve this prevailing sort of gap in the market, and how is that kind of serving these HVAC owners now in their businesses to help them be better and serve their customers better?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what happened when I was teaching a high school program, I taught high school heating and air conditioning at a vocational school for 12 years. And it was right, I want to say around 2006 when the iPhone came out. And I remember at that time, the display on the iPhone was such an awesome piece of artwork compared to like the LCD displays and stuff on our meters. And I was like looking at that display, and I'm like, man, if I could just get data from my meter onto this display. I mean, it's just such a nice display at that time. It was just, at first it was just about the display, and then we sort of started looking at, like I was when I was teaching a high school program, I was really big into standardization. So, and standards are really, really important when it comes to like a business. And what I mean by that is like there's a standard of care. There's a way that you do things. Every single technician goes in and does the same process the same way every time, so we get like very, very consistent results. And I did that with a notebook I built with a kid. So like day one, I give them a temperature pressure chart. We learn how the temperature pressure chart worked. And maybe a couple days later, I give them a charging chart, and then I would use the charging chart and the temperature pressure chart, and then give them a temperature split chart. But we built this book out over the course of 2 years where they were constantly going back to these references and learning, how that reference worked, and then going back to it to help solve problems. Everybody's book was in the same order. Everybody's book had the same page covers, and it had the same materials in it. And like if I opened up anybody's book to any page, I'd know exactly what was where and how it was. And the kids still use, a lot of my students, even from years ago, still tell me they use that book today. But then, we looked at MeasureQuick, and I'm like, when we started getting it going, I was like, well, we got the display going. What could we do with the calculations? So then we started doing the calculations, and we realized that calculations were really handy, but then we realized people were still making mistakes. So could we do diagnostics? Then we put diagnostics in to help people diagnose problems, and we still found out people were having trouble. So then we added in just-in-time education to teach them about what that diagnostic meant, how to fix the fault. So Measure Quick has just grown and grown and grown over the last 7 years too. Now we do detailed reporting, we do data streaming, we do cloud storage, we do benchmarking, we do performance calculations, and it's just sort of really grown in breadth and depth over the years because what we found out was that we really needed to standardize the way that people were doing test and measurement, and we really needed to make sure that they were consistently using the data, consistently getting the same results, and that contractors had a way of standardizing their business. And the reason this is like so important is because when a company owns a process, it takes the value away from the technician and puts it into the company. And that's a really, you got to sort of dwell on that for just a minute, but the company owns the process. The company, if the employee leaves, the process doesn't leave with them. I mean, we constantly have these like super employees that are really good. They're great at what they do. They're like and we don't take the time to like say what makes this guy so much better than the other guys. Like, what is he doing differently, or what is she doing differently? Why don't they have callbacks? Why are their installations better or faster? Why do they sell more jobs, or why do they get, like, we don't look at that. And when we standardize that in a company, and we all deploy the same probes, we all see the same diagnostics, we all do the same thing, then we get like really consistent results. And so that's a lot of what, it started with teaching, trying to get consistent results with the students, and really get them productive much earlier in their career. And then we ended up really moving that same type of mindset into what we could do for contractors in the field.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it reminds me of my days, like the first 2 semesters in engineering class in college was all about how do you actually write out the problem, the objective, make the calculations, provide the solution, like you're saying. And I remember hating that whole process. But then at the end, at the end of the degree, you look back and wow, that was so fundamental to setting me up for every other class that I took, and just overall understanding of any sort of situation. I still take that sort of same problem solving, skill set.
Well,
So
that's our whole that's our whole industry. Everybody doesn't
exactly.
realize, we everybody fails really at the fundamentals. It's not, I go out and I'll teach advanced air conditioning classes, and people don't realize I'm really just teaching the fundamentals. I'm not teaching anything advanced. I'm teaching basics, but I'm filling in the holes in knowledge. And a lot of it is because the way people are brought into the field in the HVAC industry. We find a guy that's a carpet installer with a great personality, and we're say, hey, how'd you like to be an HVAC installer or technician? We'll train you on the job. So they teach people the mechanics of what's done. We have great mechanics in this industry. We taught the guy how to solder, how to braze. We've taught him how to wire a thermostat. We've taught him how to set the condenser and get it level. We've taught him how to make duct work. But they're great mechanics, but they aren't great technicians. They're not really good with technology. They're not using technology to solve problems. They're using tools to solve problems. So they know how to change parts out. If they think the board's bad, they'll change the board's bad, but they don't know how to necessarily diagnose that problem.
Yeah.
Or the big ones, airflow and charge problems. A lot of technicians don't have any tools even to measure airflow. So they're out there, using the hand method to feel how much air is coming out of the register to determine if they have enough airflow or not. Or they're, maybe doing a temperature split method, but not realizing that you can have, really low airflow and a good temperature split, but also incorrect refrigerant charge. You have enough airflow for the refrigerant charge, but you don't have enough airflow for full capacity of the system. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges out there when it comes to the way that that people learn what we're teaching them, and really the fundamentals. And that's what we're doing in Measure Quick, is by putting a standardization process, we're putting a standard process in place. Then we're able to get really consistent results. And it really comes down to, like, when I say standard process, I mean there's 9 probes we recommend. Suction line temperature, liquid line temperature, high pressure, low pressure, outdoor air temperature, return air temp, supply air temp, and then we do supply air and return air static pressure. So we're we're in real time looking at the outdoor part of the system and the indoor part. And that's another interesting thing we found with MeasureQuick was like I didn't realize early in my career how hard it was to accurately charge a system up, because like the second you turn on the thermostat, the temperature starts to drop in the house, the humidity starts to drop in the house, and the temperature and humidity are used to calculate the target superheat. So, as you're outdoor adding refrigerant to the system and the system's starting to perform better, if you're not going back inside and remeasuring your return or wet bulb conditions, well, your target's changing, and you may be charging the system to an old target that you did 10 minutes ago, and 10 minutes later it's a change by 2 or 3 degrees. And so systems are dynamic, and we're like using these really antiquated methods of doing tools that were not dynamic. And so we're trying to make all of our assumptions off an initial set of measurements, and a lot of technicians weren't taking measurements fast enough to readjust the targets for the way the system was changing. And so doing like this Bluetooth streaming tools really revolutionized the way that we can do charge and airflow and diagnostics, because we're seeing all the measurements in real time, and the software seeing all the measurements in real time, and it can do diagnostics like exponentially faster than any technician could, because we have like algorithms. We know when it's stable, we know when the system's reached stability, and we know what measurements are, and we know what's in or out of the target range, and then based on what's in or out of the target range, we know what's probably wrong with the system, and we know how the system's performing. And so like leveraging that technology gives a lot of consistency now to commissioning and diagnostics and all those types of things.
Well, I love that. And just to kind of go back, what you were essentially saying earlier is, and I love this, is that if you own the process, you take it away from the tech, you transfer it to the business, right? And I think there's so many businesses that, business owners, right, that are worried about the consistency with which they're executing, inside the house, right? I think that's the biggest issue I see with my clients, like when they're scaling, is that as they're, as they're transitioning from being the guy in the truck all day, every day, with the customer and the client, to removing themselves, working on the business instead of in the business, that they start to worry because they're disassociating themselves with actually the customer interaction. Like, how do I bring that consistency or breed that consistency into my business? And what you're saying is essentially, hey, if you are creating consistent, standardized processes for which your tech is executing, that you're going to get those consistent results that you were theoretically delivering to your customer. And you're also not going to be reliant on any specific super tech, right? To be training all the other people or worrying about, because some people do this too, right? They'll prioritize the jobs that the super tech's going to go on, right? If it's something that seems pretty simple, they'll send, maybe one of the more junior techs out to handle that. And then the super tech's going for the more complicated issues. And instead, really, you've got this baseline standardization. The question I had for you is with these 9 probes that you recommend, right, that you just kind of listed off there, if somebody is armed, for lack of a better word, with these probes, they go out, they take all the required sort of measurements and the standardizations of this stuff. It's Bluetooth, obviously it's being streamed back. Is this something that maybe somebody like maybe it's a senior tech, right? Like the junior tech goes out, he takes all these readings according to the standardized process that's been set forth in the business. But then a more senior tech later on in the day, because the junior tech couldn't figure it out or whatever, scratching their head. Is this something, because it's being fed back, can it actually be resolved in real time? Maybe you've got a service manager who can hop on that was formerly a service tech. Could they look at the data and actually diagnose and give suggestions? Or is it inside the platform that sort of just-in-time information that would help that junior tech be able to solve those problems? And or is that data available for a senior tech to look at later on in the day, kind of thing? I just thinking through different sort of situations and scenarios. It sounds like you could probably do any of those.
Pretty much all of the above, yeah. So the idea is, there's we can diagnose over 100 problems in MeasureQuick, 100 field problems. So the problem is sometimes technicians don't necessarily know how to solve them, or a lot of times there's multiple faults. So, and the software can diagnose multiple faults. So it might diagnose you have an overcharged system with low airflow, right? Real common issue, because somebody had a low airflow and they're trying to get the pressure with adding refrigerant. So you end up with overcharged and low airflow, and you might even have a dirty condenser. It could pick up like all three of those problems and high static pressures, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the technician, when we prioritize a problem to fix first, but sometimes people see things they don't know exactly what they're looking at, or they have questions, or they want to, have a third party look at, or sometimes too, a system can be like we score system A to F. So it's like a grade, in percentage. So like, let's say you get a system that's operating at a 30%. Well, at some point you got to go, am I better off offering a replacement, or do we actually repair it, right? Because our scoring system works off age and also operating condition of the equipment. But going back to your question, so a lot of companies, what they do with MeasureQuick is a couple things. It's on every install, they QA, QC their jobs. So when the installer's done, there's a stream data button inside MeasureQuick. They stream the data, and anybody in the company can look at the data. They can look at it on their smartphone, or they can look at it on a PC or laptop or Mac, whatever. See that the data coming off the probes is about 1 second behind what the technician's looking at in the field. So it's essentially like in real time.
Yeah.
They can see what probes are deployed. They can see if the system's stable. They can see how the system's profiled. They can see the same diagnostics that the technician sees. It's exactly the same MeasureQuick interface that technicians see in the field, the person in the office sees. So if there's a probe improperly placed, they can see that. Then we also, as they take photos, we bring those photos into MeasureQuick in real time. So if the technician's taking some photos of the job and taking photos of conditions of things, we can see any photos that they've taken of the equipment, of the model and serial number labels, of the condition of a coil or placement of a probe, anything that might help us to better understand, what the technician's looking at in the field. And then you can also, like, data outside of your company, so you can provide either an email link or text link. So if you had if you're working with like a tech support company, like let's say Our Steel or Watsco or whoever you're working with, and the app download on their phone, you can actually send a text message. They can open it and view it outside the company. So you could have factory tech support looking at your readings live, and you can look at them literally anywhere in the world. I've helped people in Australia or anywhere with an internet connection. You can look at the data remotely. So that's a really slick thing, and easy to do. So I mean, you basically have all the readings, you have photos, you have the profile, you have all that information. And the best way of using it sometimes is once you have a technician that's really versed in placing the probes, what you might find to do is take one of your best techs out of the field and have them doing remote QA, QC for every service call. And also help and determine when you might want to bring in a sales guy, because a lot of technicians have the mindset because they can fix something that they should.
Right.
And it's not always in the best interest of the customer to fix a 30-year-old unit and spend $600 on a capacitor. It's like, but if you don't have that opportunity, like you'd spend probably $250 to $500 just to get to the door, and you sure as heck don't want your technician going out there making it a break-even call for you because they missed an opportunity for a sale because they're not comfortable presenting this offer to the customer, saying, hey, before we fix this, and I'm sure a technician can, why don't we talk about replacement, because your system's 30 years old and it's already had a failed capacitor in there, and it looks like your coil's a little bit worn and that kind of stuff, or whatever the issue is. But you're going to spend probably extra. We can change that system out and you'll save money, just whatever that conversation is. But now it takes some of the onus off. A couple things MeasureQuick does, or technology in general does, it takes onus off the technician, because the technician can say, Mrs. Jones, that ran a scan on your system. Here's the score. Here's the diagnostic. Here's what's wrong. Now it becomes a lot less opinionated. It's the technicians leveraging the software that they have a higher level of confidence. If we fix this top line problem, these other problems may clear out. But it's also, now it's got a score of a D or an F or a B or whatever the score is. And as a company policy, you can say, hey, if anything scores, below this threshold, we want to call into our service manager to discuss maybe what all the options are. So it now gives the technician a feedback loop that if they have this problem, that they need to take this action, and it gives the service manager like visibility that they never had, because
Yeah.
it goes back to owning that process. If we tell techs what to do, but once we we get them out there, they do what they want to do, right? And they do
Yep.
things the way that they want to do them. And so, I mean, that's one issue. And the other one is, if you're worried about, like, if you sit up at night and you're worried about losing your best tech, you go, my God, I don't know what I'd do if I lost that guy. Then you don't own the process. The technician owns you, as a business owner. I mean, they're really the ones with the upper hand in the situation. Is because they own that process. They have the know-how, and you as a company don't have that. And that's why I think it's so important. Like, once we have established a standard of care in a company, and we say, okay, we're all going to deploy these same probes, and we're all going to do this, we get the same score, and everybody's going to stream data after every job, so the service manager can do a quick review of it, make sure we haven't missed any opportunities, or not going to have any callbacks. We're going to QA QC all of our new installations to make sure the customer is getting what they paid for, and the charge is right, and the airflow is right, and we're not going to go back on nuisance callbacks. That standardization is invaluable. We see the same thing like when people implement. Like, our best clients are people that use ServiceTitan, because they've already learned how to leverage technology. They know how to use the iPad. They know how to navigate it. They know how to update it. They know how to keep the battery going all day long. They have all the basic stuff in there, but they also have learned how to use ServiceTitan to dispatch a job, to do the work that they got to do, to add any attachments they have to do to it, and generate an invoice, and so they're very process focused. And so now, if you've learned how to implement that process and that standardization in your business, then implementing MeasureQuick is really easy. And the other thing it really does for us is you can measure how your technicians were doing before and after MeasureQuick. Because here's the thing: when you standardize a process, the person you're going to disrupt the most is the dispatcher, because the dispatcher is going to say, well, my guys do 6 to 8 calls a day, and now you implement technology, and all of a sudden they're doing 4 to 5 calls a day, and you're going, well, why are they doing so many fewer calls, right? Because you guys told us MeasureQuick was going to save us time, and now it's taken we're doing way less calls per day. This is a huge problem. And it's like, you need to look at your revenue per ticket, and when you start looking at revenue per ticket, then you start seeing, wow, we're up, depending on the technician, 40 to 60% revenue per ticket. And it's because they're finding more billable problems on every call, and they're able to generate more revenue. And so the problem, the company is becoming more profitable, but you got to like level set your dispatchers, because all of a sudden they got to realize that if we're going to find more billable opportunity every calls, then we're going to have fewer calls per day. So you think, like, when you implement technology like this, that it's just like the technician or the service manager or somebody, but it actually impacts the entire company, because it changes the dynamics of how things work and the problems that get solved, and the billable hours, and the amount of new system sales that you might generate. Because now, we're not, again, we have that opportunity, sort of like when the service manager can see that system's scoring a 30%, and it's 28 years old, that, hey, let's have a discussion about replacement, because yeah, you can get it going again with a capacitor, but is that really in the customer's best interest for the long term? Are they gonna pay again in another couple months for another problem they're gonna have? Like, it's to the point, equipment's just got an end of life, where it's not going to run forever, and eventually, also, like, technicians don't really measure efficiency. I mean, they base what they do off subcooling readings. But with MeasureQuick, we're actually looking at what's our efficiency of our system, what's our approximate SEER it's running at. When you realize you can, cut your electricity bill in half, depending on the climate zone you're in, that could be substantial amounts of savings and very quick payback on the equipment. So it's literally about just leveraging technology for, like, visibility and seeing the invisible, seeing what you can't see in the field.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And like you're saying, you kind of got to take a holistic approach and realize there's a ripple effect to what you're doing, right? What would you say? I mean, I had Brian Feeney on the show last week, and he was obviously talking about the importance of like, implementing technology and people having, everybody knowing their why as to why they're implementing technology. Could you maybe speak specifically towards bringing in this type of a technology in this sort of channel, right? It's different if you're bringing on like a CRM or something like that, where it's, everybody's got to like know what their new processes are and best practices for that. But like in terms of something that's obviously very focused on maybe retooling the processes with which the techs are executing, but you were talking about the impact on the dispatcher. Like, how have you found, or what's maybe the best practice for implementing a type of software into your business like this that's going to hopefully standardize your processes, similar to like what a CRM like Service Titan would do? What, anything in particular that's of note or one should pay attention when trying to, open the door to this type of a solution for more efficiency inside their enterprise?
So, yeah, I think the biggest I would do if I was implementing this today, and I've sort of changed my mind over the last couple months, is I used to think you want to have all your like everybody using MeasureQuick, all your installers, all your service guys,
Mm,
and I've sort of backed off that. I think all your service guys really need to use MeasureQuick, because on the service side, it identifies the early the system really are good candidates for early retirement, as well as like finds other faults that are billable opportunities. I mean, it's a
hmm
big on the service side, but on the installation side, um, when you look at an installers, the installers uh, typically aren't commissioning systems. That's like a big problem we have. They're installing them, but they aren't going through and they aren't setting up the furnace properly, clocking the gas meter, doing a combustion analysis, setting the temperature rise. They aren't getting the charge right and the airflow right on systems. There's the installers are got the mechanics down of it, but they don't necessarily do the commissioning properly. And we know this because only about 25% of systems have correct refrigerant charge from the last Building America study we saw, and 30% have airflows over 300 CFM per ton. So like low airflow and and charge issues are rapid in the problem. We know furnaces aren't getting commissioned properly. I mean, it's been a long time. So one of the things we looked at with the other thing with installers is like these guys have been doing this for years, and they've got their job down where at 4:30 they're packing up their tools and they're getting ready to roll out, the job. They don't want to spend another hour commissioning the system afterwards, and they can't find that hour in the install process. They've got a system down, and it does not include commissioning. So on the install side, what we really recommend is that either you have a service person that is familiar with MeasureQuick do all the startups, or you have a specialized person, which is we call an ARC, which is Advanced Residential Commissioning Specialist, that you train. And you might need about, let's say, one ARC for every installers you have. One person to do the commissioning for every 2 to 3 installers. Because if your installers are getting one job done per day, you're gonna commission about 2 systems per day, right? 2 to 3 systems per day if you're talking the furnace and the air conditioner on the system. And so you have somebody go back behind them and actually use MeasureQuick to actually do the commissioning process of the system. That gives you a second set of eyes to look at the installation. And you want to have a person that is going to teach your installers how to correct the deficiencies rather than rip on your installers because they're not doing things right. Right? I mean, the idea behind this is the ARC doesn't want to go out and constantly have to fix what the installers did wrong. He's going to teach them how to do it right so that when he goes out there, she goes out there, that they don't have to correct that deficiency going forward in the future, right? It's about training your installers to be better installers. But when you do that, obviously people say, well, that's going to add cost to the job. Well, it may, but it may add small amount of cost, but it also may save a ton of money on the backside by not having the callbacks. Because
Right.
when you have the callback, you got to look. A lot of people don't think about what that actually costs the company, because the only people in your company that are generating revenues are your service technicians. So, if you think about like your office people, none of them bill a customer a dime. They're all overhead costs. The cost of
Yeah.
the office is overhead. The trucks are overhead. The benefits are overhead. Vacations are overhead. Uniforms are overhead. And so if you add up all the overhead costs of running a company and you start to realize, okay, here's what I have to bill an hour to actually break even. Then you realize that I have a technician out doing a callback, so I'm paying for that callback, and I'm not getting the opportunity to bill things, and callbacks become obscenely expensive.
Yeah.
So if we can eliminate that callback, and let alone, a customer that just paid to have a new system installed has an expectation of it working properly out of the gate. So we definitely don't want to have the social media fallout of, you just put this in and I'm having this problem, because that's also
Yeah.
expensive to
Oh yeah.
to get undone. It's very frustrating for the company to not have all 5-star reviews or whatever on there. So but you can, I mean, the small amount of cost, you just need to also, you need to bill for it, because you're doing something that's different than your competitors doing. You need to explain that when we're done, we use MeasureQuick to figure out your system had problems. We're also going to use it when we do the startup on there, and we're going to provide you with a report showing the system's operating at an A level when we're done. And again, they're going to profile it going forward. And then what we do too is provide a ways for what's called non-invasive testing, which means going forward, we don't hook up the gauges anymore to the machine unless we absolutely have to. So this makes service calls much, much easier, like if you're doing tune-ups and things like that, because we're not tapping into the sealed system. And I always tell people, it's like technicians have this thing where they think they got to check charge on every job. But if you were to, if your wife called you today and said, "Hey, honey, the milk's not cold in the refrigerator," the last thing you would do is pull the refrigerator out and get a set of gauges out and tap into the sealed system and see what's going on, right? You'd look at, make sure the door was closed, make sure nothing was blocking it, make sure the thing was not frozen up. Or, we do all these other tests before we ever tapped into the sealed system, because we go, well, why would I do that? It's a sealed system. Well, so is your air conditioner. It just happens to have removable caps.
Yeah.
We don't want to tap into that sealed system unless we absolutely have to, because we're introducing moisture from our hoses, air from our hoses, or losing a small amount of refrigerant charge every time we tap into that system, or we're leaving the caps off when we're done. We're like creating all these issues where the refrigerant should last the life of the system. So
Yeah.
once we have benchmarked that system, which means we know some very detailed information about how that system operates, going forward, we can just test everything by temperature. We can calculate in the software what the suction line and liquid line temperature should be based on the outdoor air condition or return air condition. And then we don't have to hook up gauges, because we can do temperature testing for everything and performance testing. So literally we can do the entire process, just less the pressure probes. And then that creates a lot of value for the customer, and also for the environment, because we're not losing refrigerant to the environment. And also, technicians, it lowers our liability and risk, because we're not taking a chance of freezing somebody's fingers, or leaving the caps off or anything else. It's just a better way of doing service.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the ramifications, the positive ramifications of implementing something like this seem to dwarf the small amount of pushback you might get from a couple of techs saying, like, I don't want to relearn the process, right? And just the power that has. And I think you even nodded to kind of my world, and just like that aside, right? Like, I think that's all good, sort of just like basic sort of engineering service, customer care, like we're talking about the standardized care. But you go beyond that and you think about, okay, well, what are the intangible ramifications of the social media fallout, right? Because I think the more that somebody pays for a system, right, the bigger the ticket of the item, right, the more willing somebody is to go complain online, right? And so
Right.
it's one thing to screw up on a service call, like, oh, the guy was late, or he didn't seem like he really knew what was going on. It's a totally different thing to be like, I paid 15 grand or 30 grand, depending on the size of the system. Right. And these, bozos couldn't get this thing to do its job. Right. Thinking that, hey, just because I spent more money, the system should be able to kind of do itself. The advent of AI, everybody thinks that, machines can just, figure it out themselves and don't need humans. But to your point there is like, yeah, that might be, 1-star review, and you need 7 more 5-star reviews to get that back to 4.5. But really, the damage there is so searing that most people wouldn't even think twice. Even if you had a ton of positive reviews, that you could be fighting back from that the entire time, is just kind of crazy. Well, So Jim, you just kind of touched on the arc, right? So the idea
Hmm.
of somebody that comes in and kind of finishes off the commissioning of one of these projects and make sure that QA and QC is good for an installation job. I know there's another one that you kind of mentioned, and maybe if we could just kind of end with, I know you wrote a whole extensive article on this, and I'd recommend that people check it out on your guys' Measure Quick blog for sure, just to reference back to it as to
Yep.
what this potential is. But you're literally suggesting I wouldn't say a radical, but a what I think is a very common sense sort of shift in our approach to how we're hiring people into our industry to fix the labor gap that we've got, but also to provide more jobs for people inside the community, but also develop and execute on a higher level of customer experience. So maybe you could just kind of touch on kind of the thinking and the approach of the ARC, and then is the rest or RES.
Test.
Okay,
Tech.
test. Okay.
TES. Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Tech
I got it.
efficiency
I got the
specialist.
acronym mixed
Yep.
up. Yeah. So maybe you could just
Yep.
touch on those two things as we kind of close out here, because I think a lot of people, obviously, this all sounds great, and I think the idea where maybe the most of the hunger might lie is in being able to bring on more people to make the system more efficient, but at the same time to tackle more jobs, and the attractiveness of obviously the lifetime value of your customer going up by implementing these standardized processes, while at the same time reducing your callback number. I mean, these are all great things, but tactically speaking, how might they be able to create some additional opportunities with this sort of different approach that you've got? I'd love
So
for you to share a little bit about that.
yeah, so I can't really save the brainchild for this because it was actually one of our contractors that's using Measure Quick. We have a guy out here, Chad Simpson. He owns a company called Simpson Salute. They're out of Canton area,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually hired a full-time vocational school instructor to come in and teach all his employees Measure Quick. They put him on full time. They set a training center up and they started doing training. Well, Chad, one day, I can't remember. I think his first technician was actually an auto service guy who's working, doing work on his car. And he's like, man, you're a really sharp kid. Why don't you come to work for me? And so this kid has skills. He knows how to use a screwdriver. He knows how to use a meter. He's a mechanic, but he had no HVAC skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they were able to take Measure Quick in about 6 of just teach them where to put the probes, how to clean a condenser, how to clean an evaporator, how to do like the basic maintenance on a furnace. They're able to send them out in the field. The software does the diagnostics. So all of a sudden, like he's got 35 years of experience in the back of his pocket when it came to diagnosing problems, and then, but also like now the ability to stream data. So they take this skilled labor with no HVAC skills, stick them out in the field in a few weeks, and 90% of the problems they can solve immediately with the software. But when he does get into the field, now he can stream data to one of the lead service technicians, and they can walk him through what to look for, how to get the problem resolved. So then he went from an auto mechanic. Then he started taking guys from one of the copier companies, Xerox. And he started hiring copy repair technicians. And literally one day when we were doing a training, the internet went out and he offered the cable installer guy a job. Like he's just looking for people
Uh-huh.
that have mechanical skills and want to change careers and get, like advanced in the HVAC industry. And so these people, you would think like somebody with 8 to 10 weeks of experience would be a liability and set, but he's sending them out in the field because they have good people skills. Like you've met, the cable TV guys come in. I mean, a lot of times they have really, really good
Yeah.
people. They're in your home. They already know how to interact with a homeowner, and they know how to go up and down a ladder. They know how to do basic things, but they have no HVAC skills. So these guys immediately with the software, because they're taking the onus off the technician and putting it on the software, they have a lot of credibility,
Yeah.
and they're actually able to identify these, determine what needs fixed and what's a good opportunity for replacement. Up to the office when they have find the systems that are the poor scoring systems, and a lot of times, they're getting they're bringing in a lot of the sales, which is where a lot of the revenue comes from. So now are out, early in their careers, bringing in installation opportunities to pay them a wage that's commensurate to what the value they bring is not a it's not a big leap. So, a lot of these guys are out making over 100 grand a year as service technicians because they're bringing in enough revenue that Chad can justify that. And so what he's, like now it's more about finding the right people with the right attitude, the right customer service skills, and worrying about less about the HVAC skills because he can leverage technology, leverage MeasureQuick, and leverage technology to help them, to bridge that gap. And then they're starting to use a product called Conduit, which is like a LiDAR a heat loss calculation. So now a person can walk to the house, literally walk through the house and get a 3D floor plan and do the heat loss calculation. And, it's like the amount of skills that you have to have can be dramatically reduced when you leverage the software. So now, you spend 8 to 10 weeks training a technician, you get them out in the field a little bit, make sure they understand, the probe placement. And once they know where to put the probes, the software does the rest for them. And like I said, you have that ability to stream the data remotely, to look at it remotely and assist the technician without sending somebody out to assist them, right? So now I don't have to send my lead tech out to help this guy actually do it remotely. Because think about an iPhone now, we have voice, we have video, we have text. And now we have all the readings. So it's like you may as well just be standing right there, because you've got all that technology in your pocket. So it's a very powerful way of leveraging technology to help close the labor gap. And like I said, you do need skilled labor, and you're not going to take somebody that is never picked a screwdriver or doesn't, understand some basic mechanical things and make them a technician. But if they have mechanical skills, you could definitely get them up to speed. And what's cool too with the software is because it does a diagnostic and then tells you what's wrong, how it determined what's wrong, and how to fix it, is that they actually are learning as they're going. So like when it tells you have a dirty condenser coil, the first time you might read it, it tells you, disassemble the condenser, wash from the inside out. It's like once you've done that twice, you don't have to go into that diagnostic again because you know what you need to do. Right, because I would train you in the software what you need to do. Same thing with charging a system or whatever issue is that you need somebody that can read and but the biggest thing is to teach them how to navigate the software to figure out how to get to those things. But once they can do that, it's you're leveraging the software for the measurements, for the training, for the increased productivity of the technicians early in their career. I mean, there's just so many benefits to doing this, and it's not something we're dreaming of. It's something that people are doing right now. I mean, Chad's not the only one. We're seeing a lot of benefiting by closing that skilled labor gap and getting, instead of stealing, from their competitors, trying to steal their better guys, they're just building their own teams.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, I think first of all, your talent pool significantly increases, right? Like you're saying, like you just finished there, right? It's like, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I got to go, steal a tech from a competitor. Nobody likes that. We don't want our industry to be cutthroat in that realm or regard, right? But to what you were sharing about what Chad's been doing is like your labor pool is almost infinite in a way. Because most HVAC contractors aren't thinking that, hey, I can take somebody, like the internet repair guy, right? Or an auto mechanic. And, those industries in of themselves, they go through their own sort of ebbs and flows. And I think the power is, and we've been hearing it so much, even in the mainstream media, is like our concern for the trades and the blue collar, workers is like, everybody knows that like there's a huge labor gap there, right? I think it's just most people mentally have psyched themselves out or given themselves this unnecessary hurdle in their mind that I got to go do all this extra training, when what you're saying is that, hey, in 3 to 6 weeks, you could literally be up and doing and solving 90% of these issues. 10% of them could be solved by a service manager. And like you're saying, what I was thinking about is like time in the Navy, it's all about OJT, right? Like yeah, your A school or whatever you're going to gives you general basic parameters, but like it depends on what ship you go to as to what systems you're actually going to be handling, and you're going to become an expert on whatever systems that ship has. And then if you go to a new ship, you
Right.
obviously got to retool and you got to figure it out, right? But that's I think the coolness and the beauty of our industry is that like the technology is always evolving. So hopefully you're always wanting to learn, you're always wanting to evolve, and instead targeting people that have the customer service skills and the soft skills. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot with other guests, is like you really want to hire for not the hard skills, right? Because you can theoretically teach those, and your technology makes it even easier, right? But hire for the soft skills, right? The personality, the outgoing nature, or the introverted nature. It doesn't really matter. I think that's kind of a moot point. But just in general, like somebody's willingness to want to serve the customer and do right by the customer, and instead you can train them on all the hard skills as well. So
Well, that's yeah.
love
I
it.
mean, that's if you it's all about leveraging technology. I mean, we're at a very interesting point in time in our history. I mean, if you back when I was in school, we we learned how computers worked. We learned about RAM and how to connect the mouse and how serial ports worked, and we learned how to program in BASIC and how to Ubuntu and all the it was like it was more about how the technology worked than about leveraging the technology.
Right.
Today, if you looked at nobody learns how an iPad works or how a computer works. We learn how to work with a computer. We learn how to use the
Yeah.
software. We learn, you know, uh, set. And we're to that point today where instead of, people are so immersed in technology. There's like everybody has a smartphone. Everybody knows how a smartphone works. That now we can just put an app on somebody's phone and we can really change the trajectory of their career because they're able to leverage all of this, all the power of the technology versus having to actually learn how it all works. And we do this stuff every day. We don't think about it. I mean, people add, multiply, and divide, and square root, and use a calculator, but they don't necessarily. If you had to do it all by hand and do long division, I mean, people be going, "Oh crap, I don't remember how to do that." What do I do
Right.
with the remainder? But we do it on a calculator all the time, and it's the same thing when we're using technology to, we put the probes on, we get, think we fix the problem, then we can see, did the problem get fixed after we're done? And yeah, it's fixed, and stream the data, have somebody look at it remotely. Yeah, it's fixed. The data looks good, and it's like it just takes a like I said, you can take what would be 35 years of experience and put it in somebody's pocket. They can leverage it in a
Yeah.
couple of days. So it's literally about just rethinking about as if you're a business owner or a contractor, thinking about how you can like change what you're doing so you get some different results and leverage technology and it's all out there. I mean, it's just a matter of put it's the trick is honestly it's the hardest part for people is actually implementing. It's actually the
Yep.
change. It's
Hmm.
actually um, uh, and we're trying to make that easier. Like we've made guided workflows and things in MeasureQuick to walk people step by step through. But you mentioned earlier, how do you stop the pushback? And it's been interesting because we've seen that over the years. We've seen technicians like, I've been using my gauges, my thermometers for all these years. I don't need this BS. They get really indignant about it. And the boss finally, puts their hand down and they take the analog gauges out of the truck and they say, damn it, I paid for this. You're going to use it. This is what we're going to do. And then a week later, they're coming back, apologizing. The boss are going, "This is really awesome. I love this technology. I don't know why I was such an idiot, not
Yeah.
implementing it." Because they immediately, I mean, I'm going on 40 years of experience now, and well, not quite 35-ish, but I designed the software, and I can't diagnose a problem faster than the software can
Yeah.
because the time it stabilizes reading it, it takes all those measurements and it knows what's wrong, and it's just like like you can't, you just can't beat it. So I have a lot of techs that they always like to try and figure out what's fun what the software does and that kind of stuff to sort of gamify it. But at the end of the day, at 4:30 noon when you're cooked on a Friday, it's a big benefit to be able to leverage technology so you don't miss a problem and you don't have to think quite as hard,
Yeah.
and it finds things people just they don't overlook, like return air duct leakage is a big one we identify all the time. People would otherwise miss it. And it's the software picks it up, and it's like people sometimes can't even believe that they're finding that problem, but it's just it's all fundamentals. Everything comes down, measurements and being able to know what the measurements should be before you make them, and that's this whole secret behind the
Yeah.
software.
Well, it reminds me of I think it was like Vince Lombardi, the first thing is like, this is a football, right? Or John Wooden, teaching them how to tie their shoelaces, right? It all goes back
Hmm.
to the basics. So, well, Jim, thank you so much for being on. I really do appreciate all the insight and the wisdom that you've shared. If somebody does want to get in contact with you or maybe learn a little bit more about MeasureQuick and what you're up to, what's the best way to kind of get in contact with you?
MeasureQuick.com is the best way. We do classes on MeasureQuick. We have a 101 class coming up in April. We have train-to-trainer courses. So there's a whole section on training on MeasureQuick if you want to implement it. And then Brian Feeney does work for us for onboarding contractors and contractor success. So we have a training division. We have a little bit of everything in there, but the website's usually the best place to go. And we have a pretty good bit of videos on YouTube that show how MeasureQuick works and training and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of resources out there if you just poke around a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jim. We really appreciate you being on. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast. Hopefully you gained some serious insight here with Jim on what you can do next inside your business. I think there's an infinite way that you can go here, but definitely making sure that you're taking steps in the right direction. And again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, write a review if you feel so inclined, and get this word out and hopefully spread this and share this podcast with other HVAC owners so that we can all continue to level up our game and improve our industry as a whole. Until next time, we'll see you later. Take care.